I am live. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Gordy Nuck, and you are watching Act One, a Canadian take on news events. And tonight we're going to be talking about digital ID and everything it encompasses and everything to expect and how to go about refusing and ultimately what a refusal might mean. Glad to see both Danny and Eat Me, who otherwise is known as Nancy, are on the live stream. They will be they act as moderators when I do live, because sometimes you get trolls, but a little housekeeping out of the way to start with. Firstly, as always, you're welcome to like, subscribe, comment away, fill up the live chat. And I encourage you, if you're new or newer, or if you haven't chimed in before, I know that Danny and Nancy are both from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Always, when I start saying Montreal, I always have to switch to Canada instead of Canada. Whatever. I'm sorry for being a little bit late starting tonight. I have to admit to being a recovering baseball fan. I have followed the Blue Jays since I was in grade 9, 10, in the early 80s when the Jays started to be competitive. And it's a little ironic given that there's so many distractions out there and there's so many important things that are happening in the world, like digital ID and CBDCs, which I'm sure we'll get into, central bank digital currencies. Um, and we're often distracted from the important things by baseball, hockey, streaming shows, by distractions. It's that old um, line from Roman times. There was a poet in and around the reign, I believe, of Nero, and by the name of Juvian. And he's the one who came up with the famous line about bread and circuses. Give the mass, give the horde, give the unthinking mob bread, give them food to eat, and give them a show. Hockey, baseball, basketball, football, streaming shows, whatever the case, give them a show, a circus, and then you can oppress, rule, and dominate the population because, hey, I've got food in my belly and I've got entertainment, so I'm good to go. But uh, sometimes I believe you need distractions in this world because, man, it's heavy stuff. Digital ID, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of Great Britain, has gone on record and has stated that Great Britain will be introducing a digital ID before the end of the current parliamentary system, before the end of the current parliamentary session. And I did some checking. The next election has to take place in Great Britain by 2029. That's the required date. There could be one before that under the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy. There could be a vote of no confidence. There could be Keir Starmer himself could pull the plug. But if things run the full course, there will not be an election in Great Britain until 2029. I see that the chat is all being filled up right now. Sharunian, who I haven't seen for a little bit. Sharunian Allegiance has shown up and is calling me Mr. Clean. Yeah, I've shaved it right down again. I do have some hair, but it not very little up top, just a few strands here and there. I have your classic bald head. And I thank goodness that I have a reasonably well-shaped melon, no big pot marks or anything. Uh, wow. And yeah, if anyone's curious, the Jays did win. I think the final score was 5-2. And now Toronto will be moving on to what is referred to as the American League Championship Series. And they took out the Yankees, and it doesn't get any bigger than that, taking the Yankees out. There will be a lot of hand wringing and second guessing and all manner. New York is sports obsessed. They expect, especially in baseball, they expect to win constantly. But mine is not a sports channel. Although I used to play baseball and I was decent. I wasn't good, but I was okay. I was a reasonably decent baseball player. Played third base, a little bit of pitching, the outfield. You could put me pretty much anywhere except second base. And the only reason is I couldn't make that short throw over to first. I either needed to throw hard. I could that throw to first always messed me up at second base. If I was at third or short or in the outfield, no problem. Anyway, let's get on to digital ID. Uh, there's one aspect I don't think I've done two videos on it now, two pre-recorded, uploaded videos that I scripted out. And one thing I don't think I touched on enough was how integral CBDCs will be to a digital ID, that the two will be linked. That is my opinion, and for me, it's not a question of, you know, I'm not gonna express it in a conditional format. I'm not gonna say it would be necessary, it will be, because to my way of thinking, this is 100% coming. I think Keir Starmer laid it out very, very plainly that a digital ID will be implemented before the end of the next parliamentary session, or before the end of this parliamentary session, rather. And it will be mandatory if you want to work. If you want to have employment in the UK, you're going to be required to have a digital ID. Uh, and Danny is saying, rather than referring to him as Keir Starmer, he should be called Herr Starmer. And it almost sounds like a bit of a German name, doesn't it? Starmer, Herr Starmer. Herr, Herr, is German for Mr. Herr und Frau. Ich spreche kleine bisschen Deutsche. I speak a very rudimentary, basic German, not a lot. En français, je suis plus ou moins bilingue. In French, I'm more or less bilingual. German, kleine bisschen, little bit. But at any rate, what Keir Starmer said during his speech announcing that digital IDs will be implemented is he talked about how it will be needed to address upstream issues that are facing Great Britain, one of which that he named was climate change. Now, how would a digital ID help combat climate change? How is restricting people from being allowed to work unless they have a digital ID, how is that going to combat climate change? And of course, this is all predicated on you have to believe that human activity has a significant, substantial impact on climate, which incidentally, I do not. I believe that the human impact on climate is negligible at best. Climate changes. Climate has always changed, will always change. But let's assume human activity, carbon footprint does impact climate. How would a digital ID mitigate against carbon emissions? Well, and this is where I believe CBDCs come in, central bank digital currencies tied to a digital ID would enable the government to have total surveillance over all your spending, how much gas you use, how much you drive, how much you travel. And I don't think it is taking things a step too far by any stretch of the imagination to envision a situation where the government says that each individual will be monitored to only allow them a certain number of kilometers traveled. We get into this concept of 15-minute cities. And then once you have gone over, then your permissions tied to your digital ID can be rescinded. You no longer have permission to buy petrol, as they call gasoline in Great Britain. You no longer have permission to board an airplane. You no longer have permission to make certain purchases that have a carbon footprint associated with them. And to my mind, integrating CBDC, central bank digital currency, with the digital ID is integral. And I expect that it will be coming. And I almost feel as if digital ID is a concern, but we're getting away from central bank digital currencies. There's not as much talk about that, and that perhaps should be more of a concern. In my two previous videos that I uploaded, I made reference to Revelation chapter 13, wherein it says that you will have to take the mark, which I believe is the digital ID, and I think it will eventually be an implanted chip of some description. Um, Central bank digital currencies are going to be integral to that system. Let me read up on what's being said. I've got a number of comments being thrown up by Danny, by uh, someone else showed up, and they've too many messages are coming up. Oh, Danny has a good line: bread, circuses, and Soma. If you've read the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Soma is a drug. And it is said, better a gram than a dam. Don't get upset. Don't get angry. Here, take a pill. Take Soma. Uh, so everyone's saying hi. I like what Danny's saying. Ich bin ein Montrealer instead of Ich bin ein Berliner. Um, and then Danny goes on to say that if Canada went 100% green today, it would not make a bit of difference in the greater scheme of things in terms of climate. And Danny's further saying governments are also working to change the weather. And he's suggesting everyone take a look into HARP, HAARP, which is weather modification technology, which does exist. Weather modification technology is now out of the closet, so to speak. Cloud seeding and the like is now spoken of openly in the mainstream, whereas just a few years ago, short years ago, it was a conspiracy theory. Now it's in the mainstream. Uh, let's go on. Danny's talking about the chemtrails. They rain over our heads, also modify weather, as well as they say, dim the sun. That's Bill Gates' famous plan, where he wants to put reflective metals into the atmosphere in order to reflect and deflect the heat coming in from the sun. We're only going to make things worse. Weather changes, significant weather events happen, always have, always will. And it's that old bromide of create a problem and then offer the solution to the problem that you created. Getting back to digital ID, one of the things Keir Starmer said in the UK, there's a big push against the degree of immigration. The British society is being completely overhauled. There are so many people coming in that it's impossible for a society to have a cohesive culture when the ground is shaking under their feet because there's just so many people coming in. And Britons are concerned with it. There have been massive protests. And now Keir Starmer is saying with the implementation of a digital ID, we'll be able to track and control and combat this problem of massive migration into our country. Well, then, if it's such a huge problem, why did you allow massive levels of migration before to begin with? Create a problem, offer the solution. The problem, mass migration. Solution, an Orwellian digital ID that will grant the state 24/7, 365 surveillance over the population. This is going to get scary, and I'm not predicting that it's going to happen next week, next month, or even next year. But I do think we are looking at 2030 as kind of a line in the sand, the way I see things. Uh, Danny goes on to say the scary thing about digital currencies is they can make it disappear as they want when they want with cash. You can have cash in hand. I don't think you type that. The scary thing about digital currency is they can make it disappear as they want, when they want, with cash money. You can have cash in hand. If you have CBDCs, you need a digital wallet. You won't have physical paper, hard currency coins in your pocket to spend. You will have a digital wallet. And I imagine initially, until the chip technology gets pervasively adopted, that it'll be on your phone. And then your cash can be suspended. You've spent too much. You're buying too much petrol. You're taking too many trips. We're going to restrict your purchases now. And Canadians know well what happened during our Ottawa trucker convoy protest in 2022. Yeah, I think, yeah, it was 2022. The government instructed the banks to freeze the assets of protesters, people who had made donations to the Freedom Convoy, suddenly found themselves shut out of their bank accounts. They couldn't pay their mortgages, pay their rent, they couldn't withdraw cash. That's the type of world that they are moving us toward. And I'm here to say that a lot of people will go along. I think there's a tendency for those of us who are pushing back against this great reset, fourth industrial revolution, Agenda 2030. There are so many different names, but those of us pushing back against the agenda have a tendency to operate in our echo chamber. And a lot of times our echo chamber is digital. When you're out and about, interacting with friends, with family, with neighbors, these conversations, what are people talking about? They're talking about the Blue Jay game. Hey, we're going to the ALCS. We might win another World Series. Or they're talking about the weather, or they're talking about their jobs. They're not talking about global world issues or even national issues. They're not, might be a little complaining, but people realize that in the marketplace, when you're around people, there are different attitudes. And so a lot of time we steer away from these conversations. And I have a lot of conversations with people where it's almost like we're feeling out the ground to see, can we venture into politics? Are we like-minded? And I'm willing to push when I come across those individuals who think that Mark Carney is a wonderful prime minister. I'm willing to push. I'm willing to express a contrary opinion. I think I'm a bit of a rare bird because I think a lot of people just tend to say, you know what, it's just better not to talk about this. How about the Blue Jays? Uh, I'm going to read up on what's being written and then we'll get more into it. Danny is expressing the opinion that if nobody accepts this digital ID, that it cannot be implemented. And I shared in one of those videos, I think the most recent one, I shared a podcast interview between Neil Oliver, who's a Scottish, uh, can you do my Scottish accent? He doesn't, he's got a bit of a different Scottish accent. Neil Oliver, very long haired. I think he got his teeth as being a media personality in Britain, dealing primarily with archaeology, and gained some fame then, uh, gained some fame from that. And then during the COVID era, he blew up a bit as being one of the voices, one of the few voices who was willing to push back on things. And I shared that video, and both he and the podcast host, who is Gareth Icky, were expressing the same opinion as Danny, that if nobody accepts it, they cannot implement it. And they were both expressing the opinion that it won't fly because too many people will push back. and I do not see that happening at all. I see a significant portion of the population willingly embracing it because it is going to be sold as this is how we combat climate change, for one, as one example. And like it or not, there are a significant number of people in the population, certainly in my little town, that believe the mainstream climate change narrative. And I don't like to straw man things. I don't like to make the arguments with which I disagree appear weak. I recognize that there's a certain level of intuitive sense um, to the climate change argument. We're 8 billion people. You look at a city like Toronto with a greater metropolitan population of probably 7, 8, 9 million, somewhere around there. You look at New York City, you look at Beijing, you look at Mexico City, Shanghai, you look at these major population centers, and you can see the world as being very crowded. And so the question is, of course, we must have an impact. There are so many of us running our cars, factories, flying, everything. Obviously, this must have some impact. And so there are a lot of people out there who genuinely suffer from a bit of what I'll call Greta Thunberg syndrome. How dare you? You've stolen my future. There are a lot of people out there who are genuinely concerned that the planet is being destroyed and that it's not going to be livable in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. There are individuals out there who have this concern, and when they tie a digital ID and they sell it by saying this will allow us to combat climate change and to ensure that the planet remains livable. So there will be people who will say, sign me up. I've got Max Power here, and he's writing, I suspect the digital ID proposal in the UK is a way to test and float the idea. Great thought. And if there's too much pushback, we may see another crisis that makes people afraid and want to comply. That was kind of I think in my last video, I think I touched on that, this idea of a crisis being used as a means to implement digital ID. Uh, and that crisis could be a climate crisis, it could be a war. One thought came to my mind during World War II, Canada and the United States and a number of Western European countries, Great Britain, people were given ration cards. You were only allowed to buy so much wheat or flour or gasoline. You had to fill out, you had a ration card. And and because those, the flour, the gasoline, metals, they were needed for the war effort. So the civilian population was subjected to rationing. What I could envision happening is a war causing problems or some disruption in global supply chains that necessitates, we are told, rationing. And man, oh man, over the next 5 years, we've got to prepare ourselves. Um, Danny, getting back onto chemtrails, he talks about how weather modification technology, how they, what they're, when you're doing things like cloud seeding, we have that it includes things like aluminum, barium, strontium, which I haven't heard of, and other really safe ingredients. And this goes into the air that we breathe. And then Max goes on to say, I think the most insulting thing about the Starmer speech about digital ID is he's saying it's free of charge. Oh, yes, it's free. Like the vaccine, like the COVID vaccine. Take it, it's free. We'll give you a free hamburger and fries. We'll give you a lottery ticket. We'll give you a donut. We'll give you a free donut every week. I forget. I think that was, I don't want to say the name of the company, but I think most know it. Uh, uh, And then he goes on to say, "Thank you for allowing people to become slaves free of charge, not charging us for our enslavement." Uh, and then Max is writing, "How about the Blue Jays, Fergie Oliver?" Anyway, enough small talk. What do you know about CBDCs and the threat of a technocratic beast system? What I believe, I can't say what I know. I am no expert by any stretch of the imagination. I consider myself a reasonably good generalist. You know, I know a bit about this. I know a bit about a lot of things. I don't know intricate, enormous amounts about anything one specific. But what I do know about what I do think about CBDCs is that they will be tied into your digital ID. And I think we have to have our radar up, our antenna up for the elimination of cash. I think we're approaching a time where the government is going to say that the central banks will no longer be issuing cash. Canadians can reference back to when they withdrew the penny, the 1 cent coin. They withdrew the penny, and it just all of a sudden no longer became available. Well, I can see them doing that with currency in general, and you know, picking a date. As of July 1st, 2026, cash will no longer be accepted. Only digital transactions will be accepted. This way we can combat, it's like RICO laws, racketeering and criminal activity. Now, all transactions will be digitally tracked. CBDCs will have blockchain technology, so every time a transaction takes place, it will be tracked. And the question everyone should ask themselves is, do you trust the government? Do you trust a government that just 2021 told you you had to take an injection that was rushed through development that had no long-term safety profile, and that they lied about so many aspects of it? It'll stop infection, it'll stop transmission, you know, proven, 95% effective, 85, 70, 60, 50. Well, you'll die but you'll go to heaven. Do you trust government? And I sure as heck don't, and I don't think a lot of people do, but there are a lot of people out there who simply, life is too busy, life is too complicated, there's too much going on. Just give me my Netflix, give me my Disney Plus or whatever streaming service, give me my entertainment, give me my bread, give me my circuses, and I'll go along. And that's what we're going to be facing in the years ahead. Uh, And Danny's saying that he loves Neil Oliver, and that he's been subbed to him for years. This is this British commentator who is being interviewed by Gareth Icky, who I have to assume is related, probably the son of David Icke, who's something of a famous, they put the pejorative label conspiracy theorist on anyone of that ilk. Uh, Alex Jones, um, David Icke, and I assume Gareth Icke is related in some fashion. Icke is not a common name. So you've got a number of people in the chat. You're welcome to fill it up. And if you're watching this later on replay, you're welcome to fill the comment field. And let me know where you're chiming in from if you're new, if I don't know you. Uh, and Danny goes on to say, "How is changing my ID going to change the climate? Seriously, if people buy into this, they're something in the head." And Max thinks that Neil Oliver is a modern day version of Mel Gibson, um, Wallace from the movie Braveheart. And Danny agrees with that, is giving it an amen. And Danny's talking about during the 80s. Oh, yeah, Reagan's famous quote about the 9 scariest words in the English language being, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Do not trust it's one of these paradoxes. In order to have a functioning society, in order to unless you want anarchy, you when you're dealing with a large scale population, a country the size of Canada with 40 plus million people, or certainly the United States with 350 odd million, you need to have a reasonably functioning society. You need government controls. You need laws, rules, ordinances, and you need trust. You need the population trusting in the government. And what can ensue if total trust is lost is anarchy can ensue, and then chaos, and then a new order has to be established. Otherwise, you continue with chaos. Uh, and of course, Danny's giving me icky, is how I'm pronouncing it. He is saying that it's pronounced Ike, as in Ike and Tina Turner. Uh, and it's David Icke's son. I'd always said icky. What do I know? But Danny is also chiming in with the message he puts up nearly every time. Jesus is king. Amen, brother. Because ultimately, I do not think, as I said in those previous two videos, I do not think we're going to stop this. We are not going to stop the implementation of digital ID. We are not going to stop the implementation of CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, tied to your digital ID. I think we are moving slowly but steadily toward a new order. I'll put it in that frame, and I won't say the word world in between those two words, new order. I think we are heading to a new order. And I think refusing will have mortal consequences. I'll put it that way. of uh, Chapter 20 of the book of Revelation makes reference to those who refused to receive the mark on their hand, or in their hand, on their hand. I've seen different translations, or on the forehead. We are heading to some dark, scary times. I just realized I do not have this on live chat. I have it on uh, top chat, but I don't think I missed anything. Anyway, anyone having any other thoughts right now? Danny is writing, what we've done so far has slowed them down because everything was supposed to be done by 2021. Remember, Agenda 2021 now is Agenda 2030 for a reason. We are the cause. Uh, I sometimes wonder or not whether the victories that we perceive ourselves as having achieved are something of an illusion, that we're given victories. It's almost a form of water torture. It let you come up for breath and then push you back down again. Let you come up for breath, push you back down again. Uh, and then Eatme is talking about George H.W. Bush. George Herbert Walker Bush was the first one recorded in the early 80s, mentioning the New Order. That was in a speech he gave in the 90s, very early 90s, because he was president until 1992, or early 1993 was when he was replaced by Bill Clinton after the 92 election. And he talked about 1,000 points of light and the emergence of a new order. I'm saying it that way on purpose because I've heard that on YouTube, the algorithms, that if you say N and then W and then O and say it together, that throttled. And I've probably gone too far already anyway. Uh, and Danny writes that he's made peace with God, and that he is just waiting to go home. I think a lot of us are in that boat. Max is writing that he's heard an analogy that our current times is similar to how many Jewish people felt in years before the Holocaust. Many Jews living in Germany didn't imagine that things would really get that bad. Jewish people living in Europe had kind of grown used to all the pogroms. I have trouble with that word. I always want to say pogroms, but it's POGROMS, pogroms, and these are draconian measures taken by governments throughout Europe, going back centuries, that restricted the rights and permissions of Jewish people. And there were often mass expulsions. France, Great Britain at varying times. One time, 1492, I think, the year when Christopher Columbus is said to have, quote unquote, discovered the New World. Uh, in that same year, I think it was France, but it might have been Great Britain, expelled all its Jewish population. Get out. We don't want you here anymore. There, that's a subject for another video. The rampant hatred of Jews and all things Jewish. Um, Danny's writing that in Sweden they've been using rice-sized microchips by choice for years. Switzerland Switzerland famously, whenever major legislation is put forward that impacts the country writ large, invariably it goes to a referendum. And they recently, within the last year or two, had a referendum on the implementation of digital ID, and it was approved. It was approved in Switzerland by a vote. Israel, likewise, has a form of digital ID. And I think what will happen is we'll see it start out. Think of it like like the COVID era. Think of it like the vaccines. Initially, it was you can get vaccinated if you want, if you're willing to take an mRNA shot that was rushed through development at quote unquote warp speed and with no long-term safety profile whatsoever. They've been working on mRNA for around 20 years, and not one single product had ever been approved. They could never get through the rigorous phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial process. The only time they finally got a product through was by going at warp speed. And we all know what happens. What does haste make? Not only waste, but when you move fast, mistakes happen. And that's just a generalistic comment. So initially it's voluntary, early 2021, late 2020, early 2021. Take it if you want it, but it didn't take long for them to switch and say, now you are forced to take it. So I think initially, as in the case with Alberta, they're coming out with their new digital wallet to have all your government issued identification being included in an application that will be held on your phone, a digital wallet. And they're saying it's voluntary, but eventually they'll phase out the issuance of a driver's license, social insurance physical cards, and everything will move into the digital realm. And it's funny, it's ironic because here, I am hosting a live stream and this is digital interaction. This isn't real. This isn't face to face, person to person. We can't press the flesh. This is digital. And so much of our world has become digital, and people are simply accepting the fact that this is the way that the world operates now. This is normal. Digital is the way to go. And we see it all the time now. People interact with the news. A lot of people do get their news and information from outlets like YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And they're fooled into believing that they are informed. But digital stuff can be faked so easy, as we are seeing with the emergence of AI. But people say, well, seeing is believing. I saw a video, so it has to be true. And we don't know what's true and what's not in this world. Um, Max is talking about a feeling of complacency that's existing now. Danny's telling me rather than calling it the new order, just call it the order. And then Nancy is saying, how about that Atlas comet? with no tails as it passed Mars, and NASA can't even give us a clear image of the so called comet that is not acting like a comet. That is something, this is why I love the live streams. I'm not familiar with that story at all. There's so much going on. I'm kind of fixating on, my Blue Jays. I even put a possessive pronoun in front of it. They're mine. You know, I'm, I almost feel like a recovering baseball addict, and I'm getting something of a fix now. Uh, and trying to keep up with the messages. Danny is of the opinion that NASA is simply using a lot of CGI, generated images. And they've done so in the past, admittedly, with moon space coverage, where it's been admitted that this was used to give a representation, but without disclosure. Uh, And then Max is writing that adding a T to NASA could also create Santa. Both are guys who wear red and come uninvited to your home and try and make you forget about Christ. That's ultimately the message that my YouTube station is coming to. Is the backdrop to everything becomes Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And in a world filled with lies, misinformation, disinformation, and so often from quote unquote official government sources, that if you want to know what's true and right and genuine in this world, you had better get into relationship with the Lord God, creator of all things, and do it through getting into relationship with his son. And the best way to do that is to dive deeply into this book, start reading it every day, start at the beginning and go all the way through. I know that a lot of people they say, well, I only want, we live in a world of shortcuts. People want shortcuts, 66 books, hundreds, over 1,000, 2,000 pages. I can't read all that. Give me a shortcut. Give me the important stuff. Give me just what I need to know. Well, you need to read it all. You need to read it all, and you need to be in the book every single day. Uh, and I'm just going to try and catch up with what's being said. Nancy's going on to say that if they can't even from Mars, from the land rover, take a clear pic of Atlas, which some astronomical amateurs pictures shows is a cylinder-like shape, something else is brewing up. You can't, seeing is believing, but not in the digital world. Not in the digital world. I mean, most of us will accept as fact that Charlie Kirk got murdered, that he was assassinated. I wasn't there. All I have are digital video images of that event. And I was thinking of the movie Sword. A lot of people have talked about the movie with Nicolas Cage called Snake Eyes, about an assassination, a guy named Charlie Kirkland, who gets assassinated during a boxing match in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and all the parallels between the Charlie Kirk assassination and Snake Eyes. But I was thinking of another movie that I saw only once, Snake Eyes, not Snake Eyes, Swordfish, which starred Halle Berry and John Travolta. And in the movie, Halle Berry's character is hung and then murdered. And then you find out later she wasn't killed. And it made me wonder. I mean, they took Charlie Kirk's body. Apparently, if the video images are to be believed, they basically, like a sack of potatoes, they carried Charlie Kirk's body into an SUV. There were no ambulances around. We're having this massive Turning Point USA event on a college campus with hundreds, probably 1,000 plus people there, but we're not going to have any paramedics. We're not going to have an ambulance. We're not going to have EMT personnel on hand. We're just going to carry them into an SUV. These are the things that make you go, hmm. Uh, and then Denny is writing, hey, Max, just think about this. They made the movie Gravity for 100 million. NASA gets $60 million a day in budget. That's a lot of money to make movies. And then Max goes on to say, I agree. There's a military entertainment complex. Even Wikipedia has a page on it. Wasn't aware of that. Military has a budget they spend on Hollywood movies. It's basically modern propaganda. And there are so many things that have happened recently. This connection between Snake Eyes and the Charlie Kirk assassination. Recall back to the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. That one is mind blowing because Netflix did a movie that was called White Noise that starred Adam Driver, the guy who played Kylo Ren in the Star Wars prequels, and East Palestine, Ohio, was the some of the filming of the movie White Noise was filmed there. And in this movie White Noise, there is a train derailment, a toxic cloud is sent off into the atmosphere, water poisoned, and all the rest. And the people of the town are forced to evacuate. And when they filmed it, a lot of the people living in East Palestine participated in the filming as extras. They during the mass evacuation scene. And I think the movie was made in 2019, 2020, and then it streamed in 2021 and then in 2022, so they got to participate in the filming. Then a year or so later, they got to watch what had been filmed. And then a year or so after that, they got to experience it in real life when tankers filled with vinyl chlorine, I think was the chemical that spilled out, massive fire, toxic cloud. You talk about life imitating art. And you can't help but wonder, are we following a script? And that's getting to what Max Power has written about there being a military entertainment complex that even Wikipedia has a message on or has a page on, and that the military has a budget that they spend on Hollywood movies, and we've seen that going back all the way to World War I and World War II. Think of Gary Cooper in the famous movie Sergeant York, when Hollywood was used to sell the war effort. Uh, and Eat Me is saying that the first pictures from Mars that they were shot up in northern Quebec on an island with an orange filter, debunked by Photoshop that can remove any filters. NASA hates Photoshop. Uh, and then Danny says that NASA's Mars is actually Devon Island, Canada. I haven't. I haven't. I'm not familiar with this at all. But then Eat Me is bringing up saying something is like Tim McVeigh. That's the Oklahoma City, the federal building in Oklahoma City that was blown up, fertilizer or whatever they said. Um, I'm just saying what the official narrative is. I'm not saying I necessarily believe it. And then Max is writing that Kash Patel, head of the FBI, newly appointed by Trump, said to Charlie Kirk after he died, see you in Valhalla, which everyone found strange to say to a Christian. Look, and then he's saying to look up Valhalla, Camp Ripley. It's a place. And that my theory might not be far off. I'm not sure exactly what theory. I put a lot of theories out there. I'm just going through a stream of consciousness right now. None of this is scripted out. I found that my station, my miserable, pathetic little YouTube station, raw, bare bones, basic, has gained a little bit of traction lately. That video I did on Digital ID, the first one, has garnered me around 50 new subscribers. Um, and now I'm punching in around 1,300 after having been stuck in around 1,200 odd for the longest time. I was stuck at 1,200. Now I've gone up to I'm in and around 1,300, maybe just a little over or a little below. And I'm thinking that in terms of trying to get my voice out there, elbow my way into the crowded YouTube space, of this may be something of a, if I script things out a couple times a week, upload videos regular, giving my thoughts and opinions on things, and taking the time to write it out, and then to share that in an uploaded video. And then, but I enjoy the live streams. I like having my foot held to the fire, not having a script in front of me, and just having to fly off the cuff, freestyle, if you will. I enjoy this because I learned so much. I'm learning that Devon Island in northern Quebec is being suggested by Danny and Nancy, both from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, that it is what NASA has used, that they put forward as being, here's the Mars landscape. And I believe what Danny and Nancy are saying is that when we look at the images NASA is giving us saying, here's the Mars landscape, they're saying it's Devon Island, uh, up in northern Quebec. And likewise now, I know Valhalla is part of Norse mythology, Odin and Thor and all that. I don't know a lot about Norse mythology. I just know that from an old movie I saw with Kirk Douglas, as he was as one character was about to be killed, it might have been Kirk Douglas's character. He wanted to die with his sword in his hand for when he arrived at Valhalla. You wouldn't want to go unarmed. And uh, anyway, I'm gonna look. I've heard something about that there's an island, and this gets back to the swordfish thing with Halle Berry's character in the movie. You think she's dead. You see her shot. So you're like, okay, she's dead. And then later on in the movie, she shows up, and what the hell? She's alive? I saw her get killed. I looked down, her eyes inverted, death mask uh, face, and here she is alive. And I mean, this world is getting freakishly, you don't know what to believe anymore. And with digital technology in general, you can create alternative realities. We see it all the time. Just go to your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and there are all kinds of videos being put out there where you see a whale jumping up onto a boat and people swimming with a massive great white shark coming right up beside them and stuff, and acting as if it's not even there. And the quality of them, sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes you're like, wow, that looks real. It's an impossible situation, this has to be AI, but it looks, the quality is so good. uh Danny's saying with respect to Cash Patel, uh, that he heard that reference to Valhalla, and Danny thought it was strange. Uh, but Danny just figured at the time, that it was a reference to where Christian warriors go. There is that old famous hymn, "Onward Christian soldiers marching as to war." Never one of my favorite worship or hymn songs. I don't like it. I don't like war imagery being associated with Jesus, who was known as the Prince of Peace. When Jesus was being taken away, and Peter took out his sword and took off Caiaphas's guard, one of his attendants. He sliced off his ear, and Jesus admonished him, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. You fight fire with fire, you just get more fire. Uh, and anyway, uh, and Danny is saying that this Devon Island in northern Quebec, that it is located in the Arctic archipelago in the territory of Nunavut. Okay, so it's not northern Quebec, it's Nunavut, which is, for anyone unfamiliar, Canada's 10 provinces, 3 territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and I don't know how long ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, a new territory was carved out of the Northwest Territories, and it's called Nunavut or Nunavut. I always joke about none of it and say they asked people, what portion do you want for your new territory?" And the people up north said, "We don't want none of it." And so that's the name they gave it, none of it. Nunavut. The capital city is Iqaluit, and it used to be called Frobisher Bay, Frobe. Uh, as a matter of fact, I think CYFB. I think the acronym, all airports have an acronym, and Iqaluit's airport's acronym is CY um, FB, Frobisher Bay. Like CYOW is Ottawa. I forget all of them. I used to write them out all the time because I worked in that radar station when I was in the military. Uh, and Max enjoys hearing me talk about predictive programming in films and TV shows. There is so much of it. And I think, you know, you need to be aware of it. But that, like, I think of the movie Outbreak. Outbreak was a movie with Dustin Hoffman, Morgan Freeman, Donald Sutherland, and a few other notable actors about a monkey type virus pathogen that spread wildly. And they, at one point, were going to completely eradicate a town that was situated somewhere, probably in Colorado or something, on a lake. And there had been an outbreak in it, and basically this was an aerosol airborne viral pathogen, and you couldn't in order to contain it, they needed to basically euthanize an entire town's population. And but then a miraculous, forget warp speed, now we're talking about, hyper warp speed. you know just in a few weeks they came out with a jab that would, and crazy. It's been so long since I've seen the movie, but I saw it as potentially a way to condition people to be afraid of the air we breathe, because they showed I remembered very well. They showed a guy sick in the movie theater, and he's coughing, and then they went into like a microscopic level on the breath coming out, his respiratory droplets. Remember that? And the aerosols coming out, and they zoom right in on it, and they show them traveling through the air, and then it shows everyone watching the movie and they're laughing. And then they showed them going into other people's mouths, and next thing you know, this town is all of a sudden, military is there. They won't let anyone in, they won't let anyone out, and eventually the military is going to drop ordnance and nuke the place, basically. uh, and Danny's not watching TVs or movies anymore because of predictive programming. It's a double-edged sword. How discerning can we be? You when the COVID narrative first started being shared, my view was, well, it's probably, aerosols, because I'd done some reading on it. It's probably aerosol transmission, and aerosols, but respiratory droplets can aerosolize. They can become so tiny that they linger in the air for hours. And how are you going to avoid it? You need your God-given immune system. Uh, and then Max is saying that he believes the reason why the compliance with taking rolling up your sleeve, that it was so high, was because of the movie Contagion that came out years before, showing that a virus is a deadly, terrifying thing that came from a bat. I don't think I'm familiar with the movie Contagion. I've heard the name, but I remember on the day I was working, on the day, whatever day it was in February, is when February 2020, I believe, is when the World Health Organization first declared COVID a global pandemic. And the shift supervisor working at the radar station where I was employed when I was in the Army, um, his name was Z. That's what we called him. Should have been Zed, but we called him Z because his last name started with the letter Z. And Z that evening, 12-hour shift, running from 2000 to 0800 from 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. So you got a lot of downtime, and unless there's a search and rescue going on, unless there are a lot of flight icons, night shift tend to be very quiet. We had to be manned 24/7 simply because there could be a search and rescue, and there has to be someone manning the radios at all time. And obviously, you can't work alone. So there'd have to be at least minimum, bare minimum, two people in the building. Usually we were three or four. And Z decided to put onto the TV. Uh, we streamed Contagion, we streamed Outbreak, we streamed all these pandemic style movies, and you know I don't believe Z was instructed to do that. He had a bit of a warped sense of humor, a dark sense of humor. A lot of guys in the military, a lot of guys who are in the police have a dark sense of humor. It's the way you combat things. Uh, anyway, let's see what's being written, and then we're going to call it a night. Um, Max is of the opinion that movies like Contagion and Outbreak and such that it conditioned people to comply. Uh, and this idea of deadly they're pushing this narrative through movies. um, and then Nancy is saying, you want a good predictive programming indicator, watch The Simpsons. I've heard suggestions that Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, and I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, that he is a 32nd degree, 33rd degree Mason. So you know at which point it's not a matter of having to create stories, it's a matter of having to simply script out what is already planned ahead of time anyway. Um, uh, Max Powers writing, I remember seeing the Stonecutters Simpsons episode as a kid and didn't realize it was about Freemasonry until years later. There's even a masonry logo in the episode. I saw the connection immediately, and I see that as straw manning. I That's to me a classic straw man. They oh, it's just a bunch of guys sitting around drinking beer, and look, they make fun of it on The Simpsons. Freemasonry is nothing to worry about. I'm actually writing out right now, and I will be uploading a video talking about Freemasonry and about a speech that John F. Kennedy gave in 1961 to an association of newspaper editors in April 1961. So just after becoming president, he would have been elected in November of 1960, would have taken the oath of office January, February of 1961, so just a few months later. And he talked about how a free and democratic society is opposed, or at least should be opposed, to the notion of secret societies. And the Masons are absolutely 100% totally a secret society, as is Bohemian Grove or Coconut Grove or Skull and Bones at Yale University. And I believe that these are all networked. You have powerful, wealthy individuals that coordinate with one another. Club of Rome, Bilderbergers, World Economic Forum, Coconut Grove, Council on Foreign Relations. There are so many of these groups, and they co-opt the general population through avenues like a Rhodes Scholarship. And they bring in individuals like the Clintons. Here, we're going to bring you into our fold. We're going to let you join in with our Illuminati style elite. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to co-opt you? How are we going to bring you in? You're very young, smart, intelligent, well spoken. We want you on our side, and we want you doing our bidding. So we're going to send you to Oxford, to Yale, to Harvard. We're going to send you to the top schools. We're going to fill your bank account. And now we own you. And I think there are individuals who go into that kind of situation naively, and they think they can, well, I'll play along. Hey, look, I'm getting everything I wanted. I wanted wealth, fame. I wanted to be powerful. I want to have power and influence, and I want to be able to change the world. So I'll play along. But if things get too scary, if I don't like the way things are going, I'll I'll tap out and I'll back out of it. And then ultimately, what happens is they get too deep and they can't leave. And if they still try to leave, then I think things can go very badly. John F. Kennedy gave that speech in 1961, and I think it was November 1963 when he was assassinated. Was John F. Kennedy an individual like that who, his father, Joe Kennedy Sr., was very much he was a the Kennedy family fortune came from prohibition, from contravening the laws against bringing booze. He was a bootlegger. Joe Kennedy Sr. was a bootlegger. And when he wanted to get his son elected, he had aspirations, political aspirations of his own. But at the time when Joe Kennedy was growing up, there being a Irish Catholic was too much of a liability. So he poured everything into building up, preparing his sons. Joe Kennedy Jr., who died during World War II, was, I believe, supposed to be the number one guy. It's almost like the Corleone family, and the because he had Joe Kennedy Jr. was one son, John F. Kennedy or Jack JFK. Then there was Bobby Robert Kennedy, and then there was Teddy. He had his four sons, and when Robert Kennedy got killed, or rather, sorry, when Joe Kennedy Jr. was killed, then JFK stepped up. And then when JFK was killed, Robert Kennedy Sr., Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s dad, Bobby Kennedy, he stepped up and he was taken out by the story is Sirhan after the California primary. And then all that was left was Teddy Kennedy and the incident at Chappaquiddick with Mary Jo Kopechne, a young, I think she was an intern working in his congressional office. She died under very murky circumstances, cloudy circumstances. Ted Kennedy had her in a car, was driving her home. They went over a bridge. The it suggested that Ted Kennedy was drinking, and the car went into the water and he managed to escape, but she couldn't get out of the car, drowned, and died. And it was believed that Chappaquiddick basically torpedoed any aspirations Teddy Kennedy might have had at the White House, although in the 1980 US presidential election, um, when Jimmy Carter was running for re-election, Teddy Kennedy launched a campaign and tried to take the nomination away from Jimmy Carter, which is something that never happens in US politics. If you're the sitting president, you automatically have the nomination if you want it. If you want to run, it's yours. And nobody takes a run at a sitting president for their party's nomination except to make a name for themselves for a future run. Anyway, that's a big digression. Big digression. Max is writing, I remember seeing this. Okay, I read that already. And Danny is writing that the Iqaluit Airport code, CYFB, uh, for its IATA code and CYFB for its ICAO code. My brother is a pilot out of Iqaluit. All I remember is I knew it was FB, which stands for Frobisher Bay, the old colonizer name. Remember, we're colonizers. I always, getting back to Israel, I always find it curious to find Canadians who use language about, Israel being European colonizers. And it's like, okay, you're against European colonization? Well, then why are you living in Canada? This is why, uh, drives me crazy, this world sometimes. Uh, and then we're getting some COVID stuff about mask wearing. And Danny's talking about the speech I was referencing by JFK, and he's saying that he watched it recently. It's available on YouTube. Just type in JFK speech, secret societies. And I find it doesn't get as much play as his speech at the Berlin Wall, where he famously said, Ich bin ein Berliner, or the speech where he said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's and then of course there was another speech, famous speech he gave about putting a man on the moon. And but this one to me is far more significant about secret societies and a grand conspiracy. He actually said exists a conspiracy that has infiltrated business, government, and he listed, and this is to me a Masonic Freemasonry network that operates in governments all over the world in educational institutions all around the world, like Cambridge, Yale, Harvard, etc. Uh, and certainly at the corporate level and in the entertainment industry, there's a Masonic network pulling the strings. And then we get the manifestation that we get to see is when we click on The Simpsons and we see that's the Stonecutters episode, or we see Bart going to New York City and there's he's showing $9.11, and the nine and the Twin Towers are the 11 cents. It's crazy. It's crazy the stuff that goes on. Max is going on to say that even though it's fiction, subconsciously people internalize these ideas, and then they see any dissent and they think, "Oh, it's crazy old Jude Law with the bad teeth, who's a grifter." Good, good point. And then they logically can't see any other story than the movie they saw about it. It normalizes it. What happened in East Palestine, Ohio? Crazy to think that a year or so before that actual event, train derailment, that there was a movie about a train derailment in that exact same location where they filmed it. And Danny's writing, telling Max that, 1984 is a fictional futuristic novel written by George Orwell. I wonder, I openly speculate that George Orwell, like a Max Groening, kind of had the script. He knew what was coming, he knew what was planned, and so he decided to issue a warning. And then he died under suspicious circumstances during a routine visit to the hospital. Again, things that make you go, hmm. Uh, Max's quote looks like you're quoting scripture, because deceiveth and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by any means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. That's got to be Revelation. I'm not sure. Oh, when you quote scripture, I always like to see, Revelation 20 or Revelation 11 or whatever, Ephesians, Philippians, whatever the book is. Numbers, I don't care. Oh, and Max liked my JFK impersonation. It's one thing. I got a copy from the JFK Presidential Library. They have a website and it includes his speeches. So I saw the transcript of that speech. And because Bostonians and New Englanders have the soft I'm going to pack my car. He says the word covert. Covert means how this conspiracy uses covert means, but the way when you listen to the speech, he says covet means, because having that New England Bostonian accent, he didn't pronounce the in covert. It's covert, covet, covet, covert. Anyway, uh, and then Max goes on to say, quote, some of the biggest men in the United States know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. I don't know where you're getting that quote from, but you're that's exactly what I believe in terms it's difficult to put into words, but I call it a Masonic network. Call it a beast if you want, a multi-headed beast, and some of the heads on the have various horns. Or so many different outcroppings of it, so many different manifestations. I already rhymed off all those Bilderberger, Club of Rome, Coconut, Bohemian Groves, Council on Foreign Relations, all these, differing bodies that Bilderbergers. There are individuals, I believe, who have a have a hand in a number of them. And I think there are individuals we cannot even name that we do not even know who are operating behind the curtain. And Danny is quoting from Ephesians, which I think I quoted in one of those two videos. You keep it on my mind, and this is important. These words are incredibly important. From Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. When confronting this world and trying to navigate and trying to discern, fall back on scripture, wherein in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, Paul writes, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Instead of high places, I like to translate that as outer dimensional dimensions that are beyond our capacity to see and hear. And that's why so many times when Jesus says, for those with eyes to see and for ears to hear, I think we get glimpses. If you're inviting the Holy Spirit in, you will have some discernment, some ability to question. I don't know. I don't think I have perfect ability to question. I have enough ability to ask the questions. It doesn't mean I necessarily have the answer. And I would caution anyone to be afraid or to be cautious or to be a little leery when someone comes across and they profess to know, when they profess to have knowledge of these high places, outer dimensional places. Uh, and that earlier quote that Max was giving is out of Revelation chapter 13, verse 14. Thanks for the reference. Uh, and according to Nancy, fun fact, the creator of Netflix is a direct descendant of Sigmund Freud and Bernays. And I don't know who Bernays is. I've heard the name, but I can't reference it. Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychoanalysis, and a guy who was convinced that everything was sexual. And Danny's quoting from the Freddie Quimby episode of The Simpsons, where Freddie Quimby was put on trial for injuring a waiter. It's chowder, chowder. Say it, Frenchie. And the quote that Max Power gave earlier that I read was from Woodrow Wilson. And Wilson was, if I'm not mistaken, the US president during the First World War. Uh, and Max is writing, yeah, we are I always say that on this station is that we're programmed what to think, what to believe, how to feel. That's what television is there for. And here I was tonight watching television in a fashion. I was streaming. Um, the Blue Jays, who defeated the New York Yankees. I think it was 5-2. I think Dominguez got the win, or no, I'm not sure who got. Uriel Rodriguez, I think, got the win, and Hoffman got much maligned. Hoffman, their closer, got the save. Uh, uh, and Danny had Netflix for 2 days, found it was all crap, and got rid of it. I had it for a while, years ago, more than 5 years ago, and I canceled it. Uh, And then Max is telling me who Bernays is. He was an American pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda, referred to in his obituary as the father of public relations, how to sell things, how to get people to believe. Marketing is basically what it boils down to when I propaganda and marketing are one and the same thing. Uh, then Eat Me is rhyming off a bunch of shows, Family Ties. Oh, Family Ties. I was thinking of the TV show, Michael J. Fox, and I forget the other actors who were in it. Um, Mark Randolph's paternal uncle was Edward Bernays, a pioneering figure in public relations. Um, and then Danny says that Edward Bernays famously wrote the book Propaganda. Uh, and Danny's recommending reading the book, which is available in PDF format. Uh, anyway, look, guys, it's what time are we now? 11, it's almost midnight, and I am working tomorrow. So, thank you for tuning in. You guys are awesome, Max, Danny, Nancy, Sarunian, who was here earlier, and anyone else who showed up. If you're watching this later, or if you didn't want to comment on the live chat, you want to throw something down in the comment section down below. Appreciate you watching a Canadian take on news events. It's kind of a branding statement. There's marketing right there. I'm guilty of it too. Uh, it's difficult navigating this YouTube world. I often wonder that if, I kind of do I have delusions that I can become a popular voice? Could I approach maybe, who knows? Could I become a big name in the YouTube world? I haven't got many years left. I mean, at some point, mental decline is going to kick in. Born 1966, 59, coming up on 60 fast. And I figure I got a good 10, 15 years left, and doesn't take much to blow someone up in this world for them to become a big deal on YouTube. But I wonder if, and do I want that to happen? Yeah, kind of. I kind of, I have that in the back of my mind. But I wonder if it does happen, or if it were to happen, would there be a knock on my door? Would there be, would there be powers seeking to co-opt me? You hear this a lot on Vincent Rhodes' channel, and I share this. I've expressed the opinion myself independently. I didn't realize at first that Vincent was saying the same things, but we both expressed the opinion. And I've had a couple chats with Vincent, but and we've talked about maybe doing a podcast together, but just through chat messages. Never talked to him on the phone or anything. Just Facebook conversations through chat and through email. Uh, and we've talked about it, but nothing's ever gotten nailed down. I know I'm busy, he's busy, life is hard. But anyway, I've expressed this idea, and I've heard Vincent Rhodes express it as well, that for anyone like a Charlie Kirk, like a Jordan Peterson, like stick whatever name you like, David Rubin, the Young Turks, Candace Owens, for these people to become big, it's almost like you need some machinery behind you pushing things. And I wonder, can things go viral organically on their own, or do you need a hand pushing it? And you see a guy like Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, look into that, and you'll find that he took in a lot of big money from a lot of corporate donors who wanted, and did he at some point, eh, did they decide to pull the plug on him? I know there's a lot of talk. Candace Owens is big on the whole idea that it's an Israeli conspiracy because I think it's pretty much confirmed at this point that he was talking about publicly leaving the pro-Israel movement, because of the amount of control they were trying to exert over him. And I have some thoughts on that. I talk about the fact that I if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And I always say that I'm always willing to revisit my opinions on things as new information comes to light. I don't want to marry myself, especially in anything political. And I'm starting to revisit and question. I did a video talking about the fact that Charlie Kirk was obviously incredibly opposed to Islam. He made incredibly, you think about what happened in Charlie Hebdo, the magazine in France, where there was a mass killing. And then there was, Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses. And he was, within the last year or two, stabbed in the eye and nearly killed. And if you crash on Islam, wow, like, they don't take kindly to it. And so could there have been an Islamic conspiracy to take Charlie Kirk out? I've openly speculated about that. But at the same time, I've got to keep my eyes open to the possibility that Candace Owens may be right. Maybe the biggest thing I want to see is Tyler Robinson go to trial. I want to see if he, at some point, I want to hear the guy talk. Anyway, uh, and Max thinks I worded that very kindly. It's difficult. It's difficult, but and thank you, Max has given me some nice encouragement. Um, he's saying that that video I did on Digital ID, that it's yeah, somewhere around 2,000 views. And the biggest message, take this away, is that don't look to me, don't look to Candace Owens, don't look to David Rubin, don't look to the Young Turks, don't look to any YouTube or any other type of personality to offer you salvation and guidance from this beastly world that we live in. It's been a beastly world ever since the fall, ever since that fateful day in the garden, as represented, as written of in Genesis, in the first two chapters, three chapters of Genesis. We live in a beastly world full of deception, full of lies, and it's been that way. But things are moving. The enemy has so many tools available now, and the only way you're going to be able to navigate this incredibly difficult time that we're moving into, a time full of tribulation, I'm convinced of that, is that you're going to need to be in relationship with the Lord God, creator of all things. And he broke through that invisible realm, those high places. He came down to us. He took on human flesh in the form of my, and I hope your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, lived the perfect, sinless life. It was not like Muhammad, who married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was 9, apparently, uh, who was a warlord responsible for countless deaths. That wasn't Jesus. That was Muhammad, who was, doing all those horrible things. You need to get in a relationship with Christ. And the best way to do that is to get into his word. But you got to read the whole book. You have to read the whole book. And it'll give you eyes to see and ears to hear. So I'll end, as I like to do, with a passage from the book of Numbers where God's covenant chosen people are given this blessing by Aaron. And the words are these: may the Lord God, creator of all things, may he bless and may he keep you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and make his face to smile upon you. And may the Lord God, creator of all things, he who came down, took on human form, and bore our sins on that horrible cross, that horrible, lowly, disgraceful cross. May he grant you peace. And and he offers freedom. And I can't express it long enough, well enough. Words escape me. So thank you, everyone, for showing up. Max, Danny, Nancy, Sharunian, and anyone who was lurking in the background. Share your thoughts in the comment field. Tell me what you want to talk, what you want me, make suggestions about what you want me to talk about. And hopefully the station keeps growing. And hopefully at some point it grows enough. And if they do come knocking at my door, I don't imagine it'll ever happen, but you never know. I've got no use for Masonic networks, for Freemasonry. I would never belong to a church that allowed an individual to be both a church member and a Mason, and some churches do allow it. And I would caution anyone against joining a church that allows it. Now, that there's one church I know does not allow it. It is the Christian Reformed Church. Does not allow its members to be member of a Masonic lodge. I don't agree with all of Christian Reformed doctrine, but who knows? There's no church with a perfect doctrine. I'm rambling now. God bless, and we'll see y'all soon. I'll have more content coming up in the next few days. I'll upload videos, but I'm going to continue to do once or twice a week at least live streams. So everyone, thank you, and we'll talk to you later. God bless.